Welcome to this edition of Onshore Connect. I'm your host, Kate Clark. In this edition, pinpointing induced seismicity in Oklahoma shale plays, Hart Energy recently spoke with Laura Capper, the founder and president of Energy Makers Advisory Group. She shared more about the risk injection wells pose in triggering earthquakes and operators' willingness to shake up their water disposal routines. Let's listen in. What caused Oklahoma's jump in induced seismicity and how is it being addressed?
It was absolutely due to injection wells, and in the early days I think that was frequently misrepresented by the media. They kind of say it was part of fracturing, and it really wasn't. It was injection wells is the dominant behavior causing induced seismicity. And again, Oklahoma just had a lot of unique things going. They had some deeper injection wells. The Arbuckle essentially operates on a vacuum, so it's a perfect injection formation. It just sucks it down. But unfortunately, in some places, it can kind of suck it down into that Precambrian basement and cause that reaction. They started cutting back in 2014 and 2015, and it seems like it takes about maybe 15 to 18 months to start seeing the results of those cutbacks. So they had prescribed areas of interest where they cut you back 25% or 40% or completely. And now that they've been injecting at those reduced levels, the level of earthquakes have come down pretty dramatically since then. But it doesn't happen overnight. It takes months of activity to show that response.
Which area in the oil patch is most at risk for induced seismic events?
The reason Oklahoma has shown that predisposition to seismicity, really underneath that there's about 10 different factors, and it's a pretty complicated mix. I mean, you've got to have geoscientists putting this all together to understand that, but included in them are areas that are heavily faulted, areas where you have natural stress fields and how those stress fields are aligned with the faults. All the things that go along with completions and fracking, like rock brittleness, all the things we want in fracking, we don't want in seismicity. And then another biggie, and this counts in Oklahoma and it counts in Texas, is that in Oklahoma, about 74% of the water has been put into the Arbuckle, which is a huge formation, but it is just on top of the Precambrian basement. And so the larger earthquakes that have occurred are because somehow pore pressure transferred from that injected water down into faults in the Precambrian basement. And the interesting thing about that is we don't know where those faults are in the Precambrian basement. It's so deep that we're really now just starting to understand where those faults are. So basically, any region that has all of those little things aligned could be at risk to seismicity, but as it turns out, it's a fairly limited percent of the oil patch where all those things might align perfectly so that you could have that. So there's pockets in Oklahoma, there's pockets in Wyoming, pockets in Texas. Oklahoma just happens to have a whole lot more of those naturally occurring geologic features that are already there. Plus they've got all that water coming in from the Mississippi Lime, is a huge water producer. So that kind of exacerbates the matter.
Is it possible to pinpoint Oklahoma's next induced seismic event?
We try to be simplistic and have easy rules of thumb. And so a lot of people have tried to say, well, it just has to do with volumes of water. And it's true. In Oklahoma, there are massive, massive volumes of water. But there is not a direct correlation between the pressure perturbations that could potentially trigger an earthquake and volumes. The fact is, if you have all those 10 geologic things I told you about, if all those are in existence, and then you put a little bit of water over here, you probably won't have an earthquake. If you have all these things in existence and you put a lot of water, you're more likely to have an earthquake, but you can't say it's only because of the water. All those other things have to be in place first. So you can't point a smoking gun to one behavior. It's really kind of a complex set of things that have to be in place first.
How are operators responding to disposal wells' correlation to induced seismicity?
I've seen a lot of changes in the last 2 or 3 years, I think, that have been very interesting. There's been much more cooperation between operators and regulators, and I think it's in part of recognition that we know as an industry we've got to police ourselves. We know water is a huge, huge issue on any front. So I think at first what helped do this is we all started to recognize we've got to preserve water, use less fresh water, recycle it more, reuse it more. And then even as it pertains to these disposal well issues and seismicity, and really no consequential damages have happened from the seismicity. There have been incidences I could count on one hand where a little township had some damaged buildings, but we have 100,000 injection wells, more than that. So we really haven't had consequential damages yet, but we know we can't let it keep going this way. And so the way to me it's been very pleasing is that all those different geologic factors I described to you earlier, operators are volunteering that stuff to the regulators so that with the regulators they can build a model to better predict where these things might happen. So I see a lot more openness on exchanging that information. Just all of us recognizing it's not good for anybody in the industry, if events like this happen, and information is really about the only way we're going to fix it is understanding where and why it might happen so we can change our actions.
Onshore Connect returns next month with the latest on enhanced oil recovery techniques in the Eagle Ford Shale. We want to thank you and our sponsors for making this program possible. Until next time, let's stay connected.
To stay up to date on the most recent Hart Energy videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking here.